Good morning, everyone. I'm Peter Lacey, Accenture's Global Sustainability Services Lead and Chief Responsibility Officer, here with a wrap-up of COP26. Before I dive into the successes and the failures of the main political outcome from COP26, embodied in the Glasgow Climate Pact document, I want to take a minute and reflect on the two main objectives this COP set out to achieve. The first was closing the ambition gap, which was the intention of getting more aggressive emissions reductions through national pledges. The second was closing the finance gap, that is, mobilizing greater public and private capital for reducing emissions and for building resilience. During a lunch I was lucky enough to have with former US Vice President Al Gore at one of our partners, Google, I came to understand COP in two ways that I thought he described brilliantly. Narrow COP, which entails the political negotiations, the final text, the final document, intergovernmental processes, and broad COP, which entails the wider activity and collaboration across business, investors, civil society, academia, and other stakeholders, and spans years. 12 to 18 months of work went into that broader COP and will continue beyond Glasgow. And while narrow COP may have not delivered on the world's expectations, there's every reason to be positive and optimistic about the achievements and outlook of the broader COP. At Accenture, we came into COP26 after engaging more than 1,200 CEOs with the leadership of the United Nations Global Compact and the support of the Secretary General, who have been our trusted partners for over 15 years in terms of really putting the CEO perspective on sustainability on the top of the global agenda and bringing voice to those CEOs' challenges, opportunities, and asks of other stakeholders. This time we asked CEOs in a special edition what opportunity areas they see to accelerate global climate action and what they wanted from policymakers meeting in Glasgow. On top of that, they also showcased some incredible examples of what they themselves are doing, stepping up without waiting for policymakers, for governments, or for everything to be perfect. So it wasn't simply a call to action, it was also sharing things that are working already. But we asked them those questions, and what ultimately emerged were 10 key expectations, which I covered in my first COP at Speed daily briefing video. And in assessing the COP26 final outcome document, the Glasgow Climate Impact, against our 10-point business agenda that CEOs told us was at the heart of what they needed in order for markets to work effectively, in order for them to be able to compete and to take advantage of those alignment of signals that would allow them to scale sustainability services and products and realign their value chains. We estimate that about 70% of business expectations were met, at least in part. I'll briefly cover each. First, business leaders called for all NDCs to be aligned to a 1.5 degrees C trajectory to accelerate the decarbonisation of value chains. And their national pledges, if implemented, do not collectively put the world on a 1.5 degree trajectory. It puts us closer to 2.5 degrees centigrade of warming by the end of the century. However, the Glasgow Climate Pact reconvenes parties to strengthen their NDCs next year in 2022. Second, simplifying how business can engage in COP, the UN Secretary General announced the creation of a task force on accountability of non-state actors, which could simplify future engagement and the Race to Zero and Race to Resilience initiatives, brought numerous major organisations to the table on net zero commitments as well. Third, concrete actions to implement carbon pricing mechanisms, which CEOs asked for, well, the parties adopted the Paris Rulebook and the Article 6 provisions on carbon markets and international cooperation. Another win. This effectively launches the creation of international emissions markets with reduced double counting risks and stronger accounting frameworks. Fourth, CEOs asked for common standards for biodiversity protection and for that to be integrated into climate change. The nexus between climate change and nature was a key focus area, and more than 100 companies have committed to be nature positive, halting and reversing biodiversity decline by 2030. But more importantly for me, policymakers across the board have now recognized and integrated biodiversity, wildlife, and nature as needing to be tackled alongside climate change. Fifth, CEOs asked for the improvement of ESG measurement and reporting frameworks, and we witnessed seismic progress on ESG reporting. The IFRS Foundation announced the formation of the International Sustainability Standards Board, which folds multiple reporting standards into one framework to improve the quality and comparability of ESG disclosures. Actually, something that I was in the room for and that I never thought would happen. Sixth, CEOs said that they wanted to see, and particularly the CEOs we spoke to, more than 420 in the Global South, they wanted to see governments honour the $100 billion commitment that they'd made to the Global South in Paris. And the parties have committed to honour that, the financing as soon as possible for 2021 to 2025. And they plan to double the share of adaptation finance within the $100 billion commitment and establish a long-term financing process beyond 2025. So again, a partial win. Seventh, accelerating planning process and approvals for clean energy infrastructure. At COP26, it was announced that 20 commercial-scale steel facilities are now planned to be deployed by 2030. Additionally, 100 governments, cities, states, and businesses have pledged to end the sale of internal combustion engines by 2035 in leading markets and 2040 worldwide. Unfortunately, a number of key players in the automotive industry and a number of key governments were absent. So we can't give it a 10 out of 10 or a 9 out of 10, but we did see progress. Eighth, promoting sustainable solutions through government purchasing power. This wasn't explicitly addressed at COP. However, 24 signatories signed up to the statement on international public support for clean energy transition. So again, probably not what we wanted in totality, but some positive signs. Ninth, increasing R&D funding into key transition technologies. We've seen a lot of commitments from the breakthrough agenda, as it's called, that advances R&D in heavy emitting sectors and aims to achieve net zero by 2050. The breakthrough agenda was supported by 41 countries as well as the European Union. We also heard strong commitments to scale green hydrogen by 2027, to take its price to $2 per tonne versus $6 per tonne as it currently stands today. And 10th, supporting opportunities for skills and development and the just transition. That definitely featured. More than $10 billion is going towards accelerating equitable energy transition for 1 billion people in developing economies by 2030. And $1.7 billion of finance was committed to support Indigenous peoples, local communities, and others from 2021 to 2025, recognising their forest tenure rights and their skills as guardians of forests worldwide. One estimate is that as little as 5% of Indigenous people look after 75% of the world's biodiversity. So look, overall, the 10 CEO asks of policymakers were a mixed bag. We could not for sure give it a 10 out of 10. I would say it was a 6 or a 7. I think there were some really positive things that happened, but we need to go back next year in Egypt, and we'll need to go back for the next couple of years with increased pressure from business, from multilaterals, from finance, and not just pressure, but collaboration and support for policymakers in getting to the right place. What I would say across those 10 major themes really took me back to our own Accenture Global Management Committee meeting with our top leadership in Washington just 2 weeks before, where we were hugely honoured to have MIT professor John Sternman, who is a world-leading expert in both systems dynamics, but also in climate change. And he had a phenomenal session with us. He's got a wonderful interactive model that allowed all the different members of Accenture's GMC to play with their own different scenarios for climate change and solutions. And at the end of it, we managed to get the world to 1.8 degrees C. So even Accenture's leadership team could only get us to 1.8 degrees C. But what he said to her this resonated enormously with me, and the wisdom of crowds from the CEO study with the United Nations Global Compact and Accenture across those 1,200 CEOs, which is that the more you understand the science, the more you understand the technology and the economics, the more you realize there simply is no silver bullet to tackling climate change, to halving emissions by 50% by 2030, to achieving net zero and beyond by 2050. However, what we do have is silver buckshots. And throughout our engagement at COP, what we've tried to do, and I think what CEOs are asking for, and I think governments are now starting to respond to, is that we must fire all of those silver buckshots at once and in the next year or two, as the window to truly drive change starts to close. And so on that note, I will end our summary of our 10-point agenda that was given to us as a set of questions by CEOs, and we will continue to track that progress over the coming 12 months as we hope that commitment turns into real action and into the delivery of results. COP26 has been the largest diplomatic event to take place on British soil since World War II, and there's a lot to be positive about the result. Certainly not everything we wanted was achieved. Is it enough? Absolutely not. Does the work continue? Absolutely. Will it require collaboration across government, across investors, across business, across other stakeholders? Absolutely. But I thought that one of the quotes that meant the most to me during COP, and I started and finished in our venue with, was said beautifully by Winston Churchill, which is the pessimist will always see difficulty in every opportunity, while the optimist will see the opportunity in every difficulty. In fact, as a constant reminder of this, we installed a sculpture depicting a fractured but repaired Earth at our venue in Glasgow. A piece of art based on the Japanese concept of kintsugi, which works on rebuilding broken pottery, building it back stronger, building it back even more beautiful than it was before. And as we think about the fissures in our own global society, in our planet, in some of the things that we need to truly invest in and tackle for future generations through the Paris goals, through the Sustainable Development Goals, and through the role that Accenture must play, but also that we can play with our partners and that we can play with our clients as well as with governments. I think it's a brilliant quote from Churchill and a brilliant metaphor from our friends in Japan, that kintsugi can help us to think about healing those fissures stronger, building back better, and building for future generations in a way that delivers for the many, not the few. At COP26, we saw that the increased commitment to trust and transparency, supporting regulation that accelerates our shift to a sustainable and equitable economy, as well as the willingness to collaborate pre-competitively to achieve net zero, was a strong signal from the business community at COP26. In the coming weeks and months, we look forward to supporting our clients, our partners, our communities, and even our own people around the world turn these commitments into actions and deliver against our shared roadmap for success, the business contribution to delivering a 1.5 degree net zero world, to halving emissions by 2030, by achieving net zero by 2050, and even more importantly than that, doing it in the context of a broader set of issues that are encapsulated by the Sustainable Development Goals. We're here to share that journey with you. We look forward to collaborating towards shared mutual success and impact through human ingenuity and through technology, and delivering on Accenture's sustainability value promise.